Welcome to the Heart's Haven. Let the story begin. A poor girl overhears a secret. She rushes to warn the millionaire. The hallway wasn't meant for someone like her. Too quiet, too polished. The kind of silence that echoed with power and decisions made behind closed doors. 8-year-old Emma Carter stood barefoot against the cold marble wall, clutching a worn notebook to her chest, her breath shallow as voices slipped through the crack of a half-closed door. She hadn't meant to stop. She was only passing through, looking for a place to stay warm, maybe a corner where no one would notice her. But then she heard it. Tonight. It has to happen tonight. The words froze her in place. Emma leaned closer, her small fingers brushing the edge of the door. The voices inside were calm, too calm, like they were discussing something ordinary, a meeting, a delivery, not something that made her stomach twist the way it did now. He won't see it coming. A pause, then a quiet chuckle. Emma's heart began to pound, loud enough she was sure they could hear it. She didn't understand everything. She wasn't supposed to, but she understood enough. Someone was in danger. She stepped back slowly, her shoes dangling loosely from her fingers, her mind racing faster than her feet ever could. Faces flashed in her memory. People who walked past her every day without looking. People who didn't hear, didn't see, didn't stop. But this was different. This wasn't about being invisible. This was about someone not getting a second chance. Emma turned and ran, out of the hallway, down the stairs, past the security desk where no one bothered to stop her, out into the late afternoon air where the city stretched wide and loud and indifferent. Cars rushed by in a blur, horns echoed, people moved fast, eyes down, lives already full. And somewhere in that moving world was him, Daniel Whitmore. She had seen his face before, on screens in storefront windows, on a billboard once, towering above a highway she used to sleep near. A man who owned buildings like the one she had just slipped through unnoticed. A man who didn't know someone had just decided something about his life. Emma tightened her grip on the notebook, her small chest rising and falling as she scanned the street. Then she saw it. A sleek black car pulling up to the curb. People moved differently around it, slower, careful, like it carried someone important. Her breath caught. That had to be him. For a moment she hesitated, just one, because people like him didn't listen to girls like her, because the world had already taught her that. But then those words echoed again in her mind. He won't see it coming. Emma swallowed hard, fear pressing against her ribs, but something stronger pushed back. She stepped forward. Then she ran. The black car idled at the curb, its polished surface reflecting the restless movement of the city. People passed by without slowing, their footsteps blending into the steady rhythm of late afternoon traffic. But around the car there was a subtle shift, a quiet awareness that someone important sat just beyond the tinted glass. Inside, Daniel Whitmore did not look up. He sat alone in the back seat, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. A tablet rested in his hands, lines of numbers and projections glowing faintly against his face. His world was measured in margins, decisions, and outcomes. Everything precise, everything controlled. Outside noise did not reach him. It never did. Not the horns, not the voices, not the footsteps of people who would never be part of his world. The driver glanced briefly in the rearview mirror. "Sir, we are ready when you are." Daniel did not answer immediately. His eyes moved once more across the screen, scanning, calculating. Then, without emotion, he nodded. "Go." The car door clicked softly as it prepared to close. "Wait!" The word cut through the air, thin but urgent. A small hand pressed against the edge of the door before it could shut. The driver stiffened, stepping out quickly, his expression tightening as he moved to block the interruption. "Hey, you cannot be here," he said, his tone firm but controlled. Emma Carter stood there breathless, her hair slightly tangled from the run, her worn sneakers barely tied. Her chest rose and fell quickly, but her eyes did not waver. "I need to talk to him," she said. The driver shook his head. "This is not a place for you. Move along." Emma stepped to the side, trying to see past him, her voice rising just enough to carry, "He is in danger." Inside the car, Daniel's hand paused mid-motion. It was not the words themselves. He had heard warnings before. Competitors, markets, risks. Danger was part of his language. But something about the voice, steady despite the fear, made him look up. Through the tinted glass, he could just make out the shape of a small figure standing at the door. The driver turned slightly, lowering his voice. "Sir, just a kid. I will handle it." Daniel's gaze lingered for a moment longer than usual. Then, almost absent-mindedly, he tapped once against the glass. The driver hesitated, then stepped back. The door opened. Emma stood there, suddenly face to face with a world that had never made space for her. The leather interior, the quiet hum of the engine, the faint scent of something clean and expensive. It all felt too still, too distant. Daniel Whitmore looked at her, not with kindness, not with anger, but with something colder. Assessment. "You have 10 seconds, he said. Emma swallowed, her fingers tightening around the notebook. "They said it would happen tonight," she began, her voice rushing to keep up with her thoughts. "They said you would not see it coming." Silence filled the space between them. The driver shifted slightly, uncomfortable now. Daniel's expression did not change. "Who said that?" Emma shook her head quickly. "I do not know their names. I just heard them. Inside the building, upstairs. They were talking about a deal, but it did not sound like business. It sounded—" She hesitated, searching for the word. "Wrong." Daniel leaned back slightly, studying her more carefully now. Children said many things. Most of them meant nothing. But she had not asked for money. She had not asked for help. She had run straight into his path, just to say this. Still, his voice remained flat. "And you expect me to believe you?" Emma met his eyes, and for a moment, the noise of the city seemed to disappear again. "If I was wrong," she said quietly, "I would have kept walking." Daniel did not respond right away. The city noise crept back in around them, distant and blurred, like it belonged to another world entirely. Inside the car, everything felt suspended, controlled, measured. But something had shifted. He studied her more carefully now. Not just the worn shoes, not just the tangled hair, but the way she stood, still, unflinching, like she had already decided this moment mattered more than anything else. Most people who approached him wanted something. Money, influence, access. She wanted none of it. She just wanted him to listen. Daniel's fingers tapped once against the edge of the tablet, a quiet habit when something did not fit into his usual patterns. "Say it again," he said. Emma blinked, surprised. "They said it would happen tonight," she repeated, slower this time, choosing each word carefully. "And they said you would not see it coming." Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. "Those exact words?" Emma nodded. "Yes, and—" She hesitated, then pushed forward. "They mentioned a time, around 8, and something about the west entrance." The driver shifted again, this time glancing back at Daniel with a more serious expression. Daniel leaned back, his mind already moving ahead, scanning through schedules, meetings, planned appearances. 8 o'clock, west entrance. There was something, a private event, investors, limited access. He had reviewed it himself that morning. Everything had been secure. Everything had been controlled. And yet, he looked at her again. "How long were you standing there?" he asked. "A minute, maybe 2, Emma said. "I was not supposed to be there. I just heard them talking. They did not see me." Daniel's gaze sharpened. "And you understood all of this from 2 minutes?" Emma tightened her grip on the notebook, her voice quiet but steady. "I listen a lot." That answer lingered in the air longer than expected. because it was not just an answer, it was a truth. Daniel exhaled slowly, his eyes drifting for a moment to the window, watching the reflection of the city slide across the glass. For years, he had built a world where nothing unexpected reached him. Layers of security, layers of distance. Nothing slipped through, except this, a child who was not supposed to be here, a voice that did not belong in his system, and yet she had reached him. He turned back. "What is your name?" he asked. "Emma," she said. "Emma Carter." He nodded once, committing it to memory without realizing why. Then he made a decision, not a large one, not yet, but enough. He looked toward the driver. "Delay departure." The driver blinked. "Sir?" "5 minutes," Daniel said calmly. The driver nodded, stepping back slightly. Emma's shoulders lowered just a fraction, the tension easing in a way she did not even notice. Daniel leaned forward slightly now, his voice quieter, more focused. "If what you are saying is true," he said, "then someone inside my company is either careless or something else." Emma did not respond. She just watched him, because for the first time since she started running, he was no longer dismissing her. He was thinking, and that was enough. Daniel studied her one last time, then asked, "Why did you come back? Why not just leave?" Emma looked down at the notebook in her hands, her fingers tracing the worn edge for a brief second. Then she looked up again. "Because if I did not say anything," she said softly, "then I would hear it again later, and know I could have stopped it." The words landed differently than anything before, not loud, not dramatic, just true. And in that moment, something inside Daniel Whitmore, something long buried beneath years of control and distance, shifted ever so slightly. A small crack, barely visible, but real. The driver stepped back, but his posture had changed, no longer dismissive, now alert. Daniel Whitmore did not move for a moment. Then he reached forward and closed the tablet, the screen going dark with a soft reflection of his own face staring back at him. Numbers, projections, control, set aside just long enough for something unfamiliar to take their place. Uncertainty. He opened the car door wider. "Get in," he said. Emma hesitated, not because she was afraid of him, but because this world, this quiet, controlled space, did not feel like it belonged to her. It never had. Daniel noticed. "It is just for a few minutes," he added, his tone still even, but no longer dismissive. "If you are wrong, you walk away. If you are right, I need to understand." Emma stepped forward, slowly, carefully, as if crossing an invisible line. She climbed into the car, sitting at the very edge of the seat, her notebook still clutched tightly in both hands. The door closed behind her with a soft, final sound that seemed to seal the moment. Inside, the air was still. Too still. Daniel watched her, not speaking at first, giving the silence room to settle. It was a silence he was used to, a silence that usually gave him control. But this time, it felt different. This time, it was waiting for her. "Start from the beginning," he said. Emma nodded, taking a small breath. "I was upstairs," she began, "near the offices. I was not supposed to be there. I was just trying to stay warm." Her voice did not shake. Not anymore. "I heard two men talking. One of them said the schedule had already been set, that everything would look normal, like nothing had changed." Daniel's eyes flickered slightly. "Go on." "They said you always arrive on time," she continued, "that you never change your route, that you trust the plan because you built it." The words landed heavier now, because they were true. Daniel did not interrupt, but his posture shifted almost imperceptibly. A slight lean forward, a sharper focus, Emma noticed. "They also said something about the west entrance," she added, "that it was the only place where no one would question it." The driver turned his head slightly from the front seat, tension now visible in the angle of his shoulders. Daniel spoke quietly. "Who has access to that entrance?" The driver answered without turning. Only internal staff and approved partners, sir. Daniel's gaze returned to Emma. And you are certain? He asked. Emma nodded. I remember things when they feel important. There it was again. Not confidence, not pride, just a simple truth. Daniel leaned back slowly, his mind already moving ahead, connecting pieces, testing possibilities. The event at 8, the west entrance, his routine, predictable, reliable, exploitable. He had built a system designed to remove uncertainty, and now it was the very thing that could be used against him. Emma shifted slightly in her seat, her voice softer now. I did not know what it meant exactly, she said, but it did not sound like something good. Daniel looked at her again, not as an interruption, not as a problem, but as a variable he had not accounted for. And for the first time in a very long time, he adjusted. He turned toward the driver. Cancel the west entrance arrival, he said calmly. The driver hesitated only half a second. Yes, sir. And notify security, Daniel continued, quietly. No alarms, no changes that can be seen from the outside. Yes, sir. Emma watched him, her eyes searching his face. You believe me? She asked. Daniel did not answer immediately. He glanced once more at the darkened tablet in his hand, at the reflection staring back at him, then back at her. I believe, he said slowly, that ignoring you would be a mistake. It was not trust, not yet, but it was enough. Outside, the city continued moving, unaware that something had just shifted inside a quiet car at the curb. A plan had changed, a pattern had broken, and somewhere, unseen, someone would notice. Daniel rested his hand lightly against the seat, his voice quieter now, almost thoughtful. Stay, he said, not as an order, but as a decision already made. Because for reasons he could not yet explain, he was not ready to let her walk away. The car pulled away from the curb, smooth and silent, merging into the flow of traffic, as if nothing unusual had happened. But inside, the air carried a quiet tension, something unspoken but present. Emma sat still, her feet barely touching the floor mat, her eyes moving between the window and Daniel. The city blurred past in streaks of gray and gold, reflections sliding across the glass like fleeting thoughts. Daniel Whitmore did not return to his tablet. Instead, he watched the road ahead, his mind working through the fragments she had given him. Time, location, predictability. Each piece settled into place with uncomfortable precision. You said they were calm, he said after a moment. Emma nodded. Yes, not rushed, like they had already decided everything. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. Calm meant confidence. Confidence meant planning. He had spent years building systems that removed chaos. Every arrival timed, every entrance secured, every variable accounted for. And yet, the one thing he had overlooked was himself. Routine. Emma shifted, glancing down at her notebook before speaking again. One of them said something else, she added quietly. Daniel turned his head slightly. What? They said, he trusts the wrong people. The words landed heavier than anything before, not because they were dramatic, but because they were precise. Daniel's gaze moved forward again, his reflection faintly visible in the window. For a moment, the city outside seemed distant, almost irrelevant compared to the quiet realization forming inside the car. Trust. It was not something he gave easily, but once given, it became part of the system, and systems could be studied. Emma watched him carefully. You know who it is? She asked. Daniel did not answer right away. Instead, he asked a different question. Did they mention a name? Emma shook her head. No, but one of them laughed. Not loud, just like they already knew how it would end. Silence followed. Not empty this time, heavy. The driver adjusted the rearview mirror slightly, his voice cautious. Sir, security has been notified. They are reviewing internal access points now. Daniel nodded once. Keep it contained. Yes, sir. Emma looked between them, trying to understand a world built on quiet commands and invisible responses. Are you going to stop it? She asked. Daniel finally turned to face her fully. For the first time, there was something different in his expression. Not cold, not distant, focused. Yes, he said. The word was simple, but it carried weight. Emma's shoulders relaxed just slightly, the tension easing from her small frame. Daniel noticed, and something about that stayed with him. He studied her for a moment longer, then asked, "Why were you in the building?" Emma hesitated, not because she did not have an answer, but because it was not one she usually said out loud. "I go where it is warm," she said finally. The honesty of it hung quietly between them. No explanation, no excuse, just truth. Daniel looked away, his gaze returning to the passing city, but his thoughts no longer moving through numbers or strategy. For the first time in years, something outside his world had entered it. Not through a deal, not through power, but through a voice that refused to stay silent. And as the car moved forward, one thing became clear. Whatever was waiting at 8 o'clock was no longer unfolding the way it was meant to. The car slowed as it approached a long stretch of glass and steel rising into the evening sky. Daniel's headquarters stood ahead, its windows reflecting the fading light of the city, glowing faintly like a controlled world sealed away from everything unpredictable. Inside the car, the silence had changed. It was no longer distant, it was shared. Emma shifted slightly in her seat, her fingers loosening their grip on the notebook for the first time since she had stepped inside. The rush of fear that had carried her here had begun to settle, replaced by something quieter, uncertainty, not about what she heard, but about what would happen next. Daniel noticed. He reached into the compartment beside him and pulled out a small, neatly wrapped snack. A muffin, untouched, likely placed there hours ago and forgotten like everything else that did not fit into his routine. He held it out toward her. Emma blinked, surprised. "You should eat," he said. She hesitated for a moment, then took it carefully, as if it might disappear if she moved too quickly. "Thank you," she said softly. Daniel nodded once, watching as she unwrapped it with slow, deliberate movements. She did not rush. She did not grab. She treated it like something rare, something earned. The detail stayed with him. Emma took a small bite, then paused, looking down at it before speaking. "Do you ever miss things?" she asked quietly. Daniel's eyes shifted to her. "What do you mean?" She shrugged slightly. "Like things you were supposed to notice, but did not." The question lingered longer than expected. Daniel leaned back, his gaze drifting briefly to the window where the building's reflection grew larger with every passing second. "I built my life so that nothing important is missed," he said. Emma nodded slowly, as if she expected that answer. Then she looked at him again. "But I was not supposed to be important," she said. The words were not said with sadness, just truth, and somehow that made them heavier. Daniel did not respond right away, because for the first time the system he trusted so completely had been interrupted by something it was never designed to see. Someone like her. The car came to a gentle stop beneath the building's covered entrance. Security personnel stood nearby, their movements precise, controlled, already adjusting to the quiet changes Daniel had set in motion. The driver stepped out, opening the door, but Daniel did not move immediately. Instead, he looked at Emma. "You said they expected me to follow the same path," he said. Emma nodded. Daniel glanced toward the entrance, then back at her. "Tonight, I will not." Emma held his gaze, a small flicker of relief passing through her eyes. Then, almost without thinking, she broke the muffin in half and held a piece out toward him. Daniel paused, not because of the food, but because no one had offered him something like that in a very long time. Not without expectation, not without reason, just because. "You should eat too," she said. For a moment, the world outside the car, the building, The plan, the danger, all of it faded slightly, and in its place was something simple, human. Daniel accepted the peace, not out of hunger, but because something inside him, something quiet and long untouched, told him to. And as they stepped out into the evening air, one thing had already changed. This was no longer just about stopping what was coming. It was about understanding what had been missing all along. The lobby doors opened without a sound, revealing a space of glass, marble, and quiet control. Every movement inside was measured. Every person knew where they were supposed to be. Except tonight, something was different. Daniel Whitmore stepped in first, his presence immediately shifting the room. Conversations lowered, heads turned. Security straightened just slightly, their attention sharpening without a word being spoken. Emma followed a step behind, small against the vastness of the space, her worn shoes barely making a sound against the polished floor. But she noticed everything. The way people avoided looking directly at Daniel, the way some glanced, just a little too quickly, the way one man near the far desk turned away the moment their eyes almost met. Emma slowed. Daniel did not. "Stay close," he said quietly, without turning. She nodded, quickening her steps to match his. A security officer approached, his voice low. "Sir, we have adjusted the entry points. The west entrance is sealed off for now." Daniel gave a slight nod. "And internally?" "We are monitoring access logs. No alerts yet." Daniel's expression did not change, but his pace slowed just enough to show he was thinking. No alerts, which meant whoever planned this knew how to stay invisible. Emma's eyes moved across the room again, her instincts sharper now, tuned to the small details most people ignored. That was when she saw it. A man standing near a column, holding a tablet pretending to read. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes, they were not. They flicked once toward Daniel, then away, too quickly. Emma stopped. Her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of her sleeve. "That one," she whispered. Daniel's steps paused. "Which one?" he asked, his voice barely above a breath. Emma tilted her head slightly, not pointing, just guiding with her eyes. "The one by the column. He looks like he is waiting, not working." Daniel's gaze shifted subtly, careful, controlled. He did not stare, he observed. The man looked ordinary, well-dressed, calm, blending in. Exactly the kind of person Daniel trusted to be part of the system. Exactly the kind of person no one would question. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Bring him in quietly," he said to the security officer beside him. The officer nodded and moved without hesitation. Emma watched, her heart beginning to beat faster again, but this time it was different. Not fear, focus. Daniel turned slightly toward her. "You are sure?" he asked. Emma nodded. "He is not looking at you like everyone else," she said. "He is watching you like he already knows what happens next." The words settled heavily, because they mirrored what she had heard earlier. Daniel exhaled slowly, his eyes never leaving the man as security approached from both sides. Calm, professional, unnoticed by most of the room. The moment stretched, quiet, precise. Then the man looked up, just for a second, and in that second, something broke. Not a movement, not a sound, just a flicker of realization. The plan was no longer unfolding the way it was supposed to. Daniel saw it, Emma saw it, and in that silent exchange across the room, everything changed. Daniel leaned slightly closer to Emma, his voice lower now, steadier. "You did not just hear something," he said. "You understood it." Emma did not answer. She did not need to. Because for the first time, he was no longer deciding whether to believe her. He already had. Security moved with quiet precision, closing the distance without drawing attention. To anyone else in the lobby, it looked routine, a subtle shift, a quiet adjustment. But for Daniel Whitmore, the air had changed completely. The man by the column lowered his tablet slowly, as the two security officers approached. He did not resist. He did not speak. He simply nodded once, as if acknowledging something that had already been decided. "Sir," one of the officers said calmly, "we need you to step this way for a moment." The man offered a polite smile. Of course, nothing about him seemed unusual, and that was the most unsettling part. Daniel watched closely as the man was guided away, disappearing behind a frosted glass door that led to a private corridor. The lobby returned to its usual rhythm almost instantly, conversations rising again, footsteps continuing as if nothing had happened. But the stillness remained around Daniel and Emma, because they both knew something had been interrupted. Emma let out a slow breath she had been holding without realizing it. "Is it over?" she asked quietly. Daniel did not answer right away. His gaze remained fixed on the corridor where the man had disappeared. His mind was already moving ahead, not just at what had been stopped, but at what had almost happened. "No," he said finally, "not yet." Emma looked up at him. Daniel turned slightly, his voice steady but thoughtful. "Plans like this do not rely on one person," he continued. "They rely on timing, trust, patterns." Emma nodded slowly, understanding more than her age would suggest. "But something changed," she said. Daniel met her eyes. "Yes." A pause. "You did." The words landed softly, but they carried weight. Emma looked down for a moment, unsure how to respond. She had not thought of it that way. She had only run, only spoken, only refused to stay silent. Daniel exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing just slightly for the first time since the car had stopped. He turned to one of the security officers nearby. "Keep all internal movement under review. No announcements, no disruptions to the event." "Yes, sir." "And the west entrance remains closed." "Yes, sir." The officer stepped away. Emma glanced toward the tall glass windows where the city lights had begun to glow against the deepening sky. "8 o'clock is still coming," she said softly. Daniel followed her gaze. "Yes," he said, but this time his voice was different, not controlled, not distant, prepared, because whatever had been planned for that moment was no longer hidden. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel Whitmore was not waiting for something to happen. He was ready for it. 8 o'clock arrived quietly. No alarms, no sudden movements, just the soft shift of evening settling over the city, lights glowing against the glass walls of the building as guests began to gather for the scheduled event. Inside, everything looked the same, but it was not. Daniel Whitmore stood near the main floor, no longer following the path he had taken 100 times before. The west entrance remained dark, unused, sealed off without explanation. Instead, he stood where he could see everything, where nothing could move without being noticed. Emma stood beside him, small against the crowd, her eyes moving the way they always had, noticing what others ignored. Minutes passed, then more. Nothing happened. No disruption. No sign of the plan she had overheard. Just the quiet unfolding of a night that now felt different. Emma shifted slightly. "Maybe they stopped," she said. Daniel did not respond immediately, because he understood something she was only beginning to learn. Plans do not always end loudly. Sometimes they end because they are seen. A security officer approached, his voice low. "Sir, we have confirmed it. The individual we detained had unauthorized access credentials. He was waiting for your scheduled arrival at the west entrance." Daniel nodded once. "And now?" he asked. "He will not be returning to this building." No more needed to be said. The officer stepped away. Emma looked up at Daniel, her voice softer now. "So it is over?" Daniel turned to her. This time there was no distance in his expression. "No," he said gently. "This is where something else begins." Emma frowned slightly unsure. Daniel glanced around the room, at the people, the lights, the carefully structured world he had built. then back at her. For a long time, he said, I believed control was the same as safety, that if I planned everything perfectly, nothing unexpected could reach me. Emma listened quietly. But I was wrong, he continued, because the one thing that mattered tonight was something I never planned for. He paused. You. Emma's eyes widened just slightly. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card, then hesitated before lowering it again. This was not a transaction, not a solution that could be handed over. Instead, he asked, Do you have somewhere safe to go tonight? Emma shook her head, honest as always. Daniel nodded slowly. Then you are not leaving alone, he said. The words were simple, but they carried something deeper than protection. Recognition. Emma looked at him, searching his face. Why? She asked. Daniel exhaled softly, his voice quieter now. Because you saw something everyone else missed, he said, and you chose to speak. A moment passed. Then Emma gave a small nod as if that answer was enough. Around them the night continued. Conversations, laughter, movement. But for Daniel Whitmore, something had shifted in a way no system could measure. Because sometimes, it is not the strongest voice that changes everything. It is the smallest one that refuses to stay silent.